Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Jeep Journals. And if you're seeing this, well, I guess this is the last time that we might talk. And what I mean is that to communicate, usually it requires participation. And so for the purpose of brevity, what I want to do is say a little bit of something about how I am. The way I am is what somebody told me one time, which is that to be truth, to be 100% light, you're going to repel a lot of darkness. And so to say the truth about things that are wrong, for an example, I guess we were conditioned in a way to think of ourselves as something known as a whistleblower. And when we think about ourselves in a level of celebrity or with a level of regard that's sounds kind of like a conspiracy theorist, or sounds like something like talking about the Loch Ness Monster or UFOs or Sasquatch, when you talk about things and feel a judgment and you feel like it's incredulous what you might have heard about what might be just a simple observation, then we get to a point where we disregard entirely any knowledge that came from that source whatsoever. So, just as an example, if one person was a strong supporter of our former president who trumped the other competition, if somebody were on one side of the camp thinking that they enjoyed the one-upsmanship, then basically they're going to only agree with the one-upsmanship side of the communication. If someone didn't agree with the one-upsmanship, but they didn't agree by wanting to one-upsmanship the other entity by using this other entity as a representative of the golden standard, then we might only take the information from this side of the band camp and totally disregard the other side, the side that is in favor of one-upsmanship. In the median, in the middle of the bell curve, is basically something that sees balance. There's a percentage of people who are at ease. They're not at dis-ease. They're not diseased, and the absorption of energy from one party to the other is clear. You can see it almost instantaneously by understanding that it's 6 a.m. here. I've been up since about 3:30 this morning, battling my own demons, which are comprised of a number of things that I want to enjoy my time on. Sometimes we feel like there's not enough time, so my day sometimes starts at 3:30 in the morning. I complete work. I start to get questions almost non-stop throughout the day that range from everything to everything. And what I mean is, I'm a source of conversation. I'm a source of energy. And people can take from this energy positive or an alternating current. And when people take from an alternating current that's not there, it's very easy for them to take from that current because it's not there. You're falling through the air when you're swinging at me. And at the same time, I'm comprised of the same exact level of humanity as anyone else who has gone through the obstacles that formed me. So in other words, what I'm saying is I have a very unique perspective on many things. And many of those things include narcissism and anger and addiction. And so I'm talking about these topics in a way where you can hear that we're either on one side of the camp, we're on the other side of the camp, or can I get an amen? We're not in any specific camp. We're fluid, we're water. And to tell you that we can check out of the traditional ways that we think about things, like for an example, if telling the truth is honorable, or if it's being a whistleblower or a tattletale, or whatever we view and consider one another, if we aren't able to differentiate that which is in our favor, then we might misinterpret some of the easy information that another person is sharing. Health is wealth. And if you didn't hear all of those words that I was saying, and if they didn't make sense, well, maybe you should try to wake up a little earlier and not rely on one substance or another to get your day going. You can do it. The very method with which I usually propagate this channel is through creativity. And for me, creativity is expressed immensely in nature. That's why I try to bring you clips of wildlife and weather and all of these different things about past civilizations and how they lived in nature in comparison to how we live in nature right now. Because for all we know, we can do things a different way with less anger, less narcissism, less aging, less poverty, less greed, by considering the middle, the peace, the balance, and just going, I wonder if there's some kind of truth to the aspect of some who see an image of a snake and make a terrible judgment because of the way that our fathers trained us. How many times have we seen someone cut the head off a snake and say, when questioned, what kind of snake was it? I don't know, it was a dead snake. How many times have we heard that? And can you properly identify from whom are you hearing this information? Are we hearing it from our fathers or from within our hearts? When we listen within our hearts, we don't need the other person to say it was probably kind of mean to just go up to this animal and decapitate it. It was probably kind of mean to go up to this man and nail him over some truths that were being said as a whistleblower. It's hard, it's challenging. You see, we can spell the truth. We can spell the future. There are so many people who talk about it. It's called many things. Karma, the law of attraction. And all of it has a cost. Everything that we ask for. So as we're sitting there in time, enjoying celebratory meals, may the conversation be as rich and nourishing as the food that we partake of, while not thinking about whether we're picking from one side or the other. What is the perfect balance? For me, I've pointed out on this channel, and I've shown how a 7-day reset is the first step in temperament against any kind of addiction, any kind of compulsive or destructive behaviors. And the only way that you can possibly achieve any kind of a disconnection from addiction is to stop blaming others. And when you stop blaming others, you don't pick one side, another side. There's no side. Someone recently contacted me about a song called Imagine, and the song was challenged because in the song there's a lyric that says, imagine there's no heaven. You know? Above us only sky. Imagine looking up at the sky and being in awe of what was created, whether, double pun intended, whether it was intended for us or not is up to whether we are grateful. So, I mean, the secret of manifestation, first of all, is being grateful. To be absolutely rewarded with that which we ourselves are surrounding ourselves with, that's the number one measure of multiplying your lot, multiplying your wealth, your health, being a steward. If we're not a steward, we're just errantly consuming things and not hearing one another, which makes it very difficult for somebody to properly communicate that, hey, if there's an observation of ill health and it's something that's repeatable, it's diagnosable. I mean, I don't mean to rain on anyone's parade. What I mean to do is simply say, if we're choosing from one side or the other, just with absolute critique, we might be achieving the results that we could expect if we were thinking responsibly from each party. It's like if there's two completely different directions that we're pulling, well, have we not been divided as a people? And if we're divided, then are we able to determine who the other person is that's so opposed to our views? That requires judgment. And when we judge, we start to freely anticipate what it is that's going to happen around us, and that causes an anxiety in some. And the anxiety is a resonation usually attributed to our health. So for this reason, I talk a lot about the energies that we receive in our very food with relation to addiction and aggression. And these two topics usually go hand in hand. And it's a very simple thing. We need to turn off the judgment. And for a lot of people, I see that it's so difficult that they'll unsubscribe from this channel because, well, this person, it's, they don't understand what I went through. And you're right. I cannot possibly understand what you went through. I can only understand what you're going through right now. And as someone who is going through the same struggles where literally things are being set on fire to bring attention to the outcry of some of our public, which some are closer than others, may appear in your rear view mirror, in your side view mirror. But the fact is, we're still talking about choosing sides. We're talking about choosing sides in just a way to where I'm talking all these words and you're either able to understand or you've checked yourself out for a number of reasons. You've already decided to discount me because he shows snakes all the time. If I looked up to the sky and saw a beautiful blue day with clouds or a storm or anything, I would bring that beauty to the attention of anyone who is in my proximity. That way we wouldn't be as concerned with what's theoretically going to happen in a week or 2 weeks or three weeks or 4 weeks, because all of these things of the future are things that distract us from looking at what's in our hands right now. And what's in our hands right now is a tool. It's a tool to either entertain ourselves and make us feel better. It's a tool to entertain others and make them feel better, or it's a learning opportunity. And when you have a learning opportunity, usually it becomes very simple to understand when someone is trying to communicate with you. So if someone's trying to communicate at a high level and they can assure you that there are not many people who can hear on a very high level because at a certain point in time they just check out, or they've made a judgment so far in advance that you could talk for literally 15 minutes and the other person can be holding a response from the very first 30-second intro. They can still be thinking about that. The ego can be bouncing all these words back and forth to where it's like You can't remember. What are the topics we're talking about right now? Am I in a dream? Is this real? There are a lot of posts on channels like this which will talk about the same thing. It's like, there could be parallel universes. There could be this, that, and the other. There could be a lot of things. Right now, what there is a very cool and crisp morning. The moon was shining through the sky so clearly. The stars and constellations were bright. It was cold. It was too cold for most people to stand outside in shorts and a t-shirt for a very long time. I enjoyed it. I took it in, and that was this very morning. So this is the very morning where I'm checking out. I'm saying I'm done. We're not having a conversation, and so I'm going to just let these clips run the way that they run. Anything that I schedule will be for some future date that wouldn't air until some other time in the next year. But for right now, I think we're done. And this is going to be my introductory video and also the conclusion saying, we're done. I'm done. I've heard it. I've heard it said. The responsibilities that we have can sometimes be overshadowed by the addictions. And if we're not processing things calmly, then it doesn't matter if we're addicts or not. We're basically still overlooking that there's a judgment that's happening. And that judgment is distracting the calm thought, which is the reason why generationally we might see that there's a divide between, for an example, people who might look at a TED talk or any kind of other informative video, or the people who will only look to existing entertainment, never creating or admiring things that are new in any other field other than the ones that they've been comfortable with for their entire lives so far. When we stop learning, we age. And it's hard to continue learning if we're not going to have conversation with our appropriate peers who are able to process these words on levels where they can hear, hey, I understand all of that just like you. I'm coming from a completely different perspective, and I want to add to all of this that we have some alarming situations in Mother Nature that also could stand to be considered, like right now, not tomorrow as we sip it over our plastic cups, to-go cups that are already manufactured, so it must be okay. Not the next election when we vote for one person who wants to one-up or another person who wants to one-up. However we decide to try and become the victorious one over one another by picking the correct sports team, the hometown team, or just being a part of even a gender that gets paid more right off the bat. The notion is there are still judgments and categorizations that cause us all to have unique perspectives. My unique perspective is all of that is also important. Health is wealth. The only thing we can protect is our own health. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to even talk about nature because we can't even talk about the nature of our conversations and why they don't amount to much more than just, how's the weather where you're at? What's the team doing? What are the current rituals we want to talk about now? Oh, by the way, I also noticed that each day that I've gone walking in preparation for an upcoming outing that I'm going to be the guide of, on top of all of that, I'm still noticing anomalies in wildlife. Maybe that's why I got to show those snake videos, and maybe we were all lucky to be able to see those snake videos because it might be at some point increasingly challenging to find wildlife to share with others at all. As we run through these trails with our headphones on, as we run through these trails barely saying hello with one another, as we run through these trails just long enough to sit down and have a feast amidst all of this turmoil and masking up that has continued since before we had to mask up. As we go through all of this, I challenge you to understand that the conversations that we had when we actually participated together on this channel are meaningful and not just a meme or lip service or some kind of slander or disregarding of one another. This is basically saying, if we cannot recognize one another's intentions and have a conversation with and or about our fathers, how are we honoring our fathers if we cannot actually have a conversation that includes the full truth, whether it was respected information or respectable information at the time or not? In today's era, as we look at the notion of global crises, climate challenges, and everything else that can possibly be daunting, the first thing I want to understand from any side, whether it be this side, that side, your side, wherever it's from, can we have a full conversation? If we can have a full conversation, then I'm not the only one intellectually contributing. There's a myriad of information that's coming from every direction because we're all now free-flowing with information. That's how I make songs. All the songs, I can make all the songs in the world. I can make so many songs that I can crank out several per day. The only thing is that appropriate use of time? And so lyrically, I think that I've created some great songs. They're challenging in the way that we think. They're comprehensive in talking about the game plan, less meat, using less. Definitely opting out of the one-time use line. And on top of that, basically hearing one another in a way where it's like, hey, if we're in a position to contribute information to change the way that things are happening right now, well, we're either holding back or we're waking up. And some of us wake up extra early because it's genius. It's like shortcutting the entire world to be able to get done what I need to do in addition to preparing for that which is upcoming, while also simultaneously recording inspirational content that's going to be heard globally and uploading it and scheduling it to be aired on the same day that I might even have had a conversation with you, for that matter. And if that's true, then you're wondering, why am I understanding some of this? For some reason, I'm not angry. I think they just talked for so long. They beat me into submission. There's no fight. I'm not fighting. I'm riding with the current. And when you ride with the current provides you with a lot of unique solutions to the opportunities that present themselves. And to be charged with these tasks requires sometimes having the good credit to be able to even apply for some of the opportunities to contribute to these conversations. So before we disregard one another, again, I'd like to tell you, my name is Ray. For the longest time, I've wanted to change my last name primarily because I wanted nothing to do with a segment of my life. And if you look back over all of these messages, you'll see I talk about that extensively. I talk about the things that I've run into that you are running into as well. And I know you're running into it because you talked with me about it. Everyone with whom I resonate is a mirror. We are all faced with challenges. And that's why when we look at one another and someone is almost coming to the point of using so many words that we feel challenged right off the bat, I just do this because however we do it, it's not an accusation. It's an observation. I too am faced with these extreme challenges that are also laughable by the standard of other facets of humanity, which are facing challenges of actual starvation. While we talk these conversations over halfway between errant conversation about just the weather. Well, at one point, the weather wasn't even something that was all that visceral. And now, even the weather can be a challenging conversation. So, whether we think about it or not, double pun, triple pun, multi-dimensional pun, the spelling of how we approach things, whether we can hear the whole truth, can sometimes determine if we're making choices based on fear or if we're making observations and conclusions that are inclusive. We either have bigoted information or we have comprehensive, inclusive information. Information that includes multiple perspectives. Not just the majority, because the majority should also include, especially under extreme circumstances, this side and that side, and that side and that side and all sides. Your side in particular. Your side absolutely deserves to be victorious. If you're suffering from addiction, you don't need to. I know that you can escape those bonds. I know it's even easier in nature. And if that's what you want to do, then that's probably the best way to do it based on some information I learned when I was inclusive of my research and I looked into the past and heard of peace talkers who sometimes they went without food. Some of those thoughts alone might scare someone else into trying to come around to feed you on a regular basis. Some people are afraid of even just giving up one piece of a complete theoretical meal. In other words, they might consider going without meat. Going without meat, imagine the resources right off the bat for one day of going without meat. Imagine the resources that would be saved. You had a whole animal's lifespan of consumption that didn't happen just to be consumed in one moment. The animal might still play a vital part of the ecosystem if it was not taken out or modified or introduced in a certain way to basically be brought and sold to us at a convenience price, at a value. All of that brings us together to have value conversations. Which conversation is more valuable, though? The one that's basically filled with a table that has all these things to eat, but nothing nourishing to have a conversation about? Or is it more valuable to have had that conversation that it never ends? You can have that conversation for the entire span of the entire night, from 3:30 in the afternoon till 3:30 in the next afternoon. Those conversations are the things where we truly connect and understand that not only is it possible to have a conversation that's way deeper, but we tend to be more in love when we have fuller control over the choices that we make. It's only by introducing bias from one side or the other side or our own side. It's only when we introduce bias that we start to stop short of seeing that other person as something like ourselves that we would love. So the segregation is something that we're all learning through. We're all challenged in different ways based on the perceptions that we have of one another. We're all able to overcome these adversities, though, especially when we're able to talk together. So when we talk together about changing from one plastic source to another, just so that there can be a lid without a straw, when we talk about those things, maybe we can talk about replacing plastic in the entire stream that's being modified to something that's more biodiverse, something that's more ethical, something that makes more sense. There can be so many ideas, and the only way that these conversations can occur is when we're able to hear each other's words. And in some cases, some people will intellectually reach out and they'll start to have a conversation, and then they'll be stopped. And it's because of a bias, usually against me for some reason. Maybe I showed a picture of a snake. Maybe you think I'm a snake. Maybe you're a snake. These are all judgments that we can feel, but I absolutely enjoy seeing the serpents, whether it's a venomous one or not, whether it was something that was made to do that bidding for eternity or not. It's something that brings reward to our day, to see nature, and we know it. We know it to be true. We know it to be true so much that any anger and hostility that's ever been held against me for showcasing beauty is refuted. I refute it, I reject it, I don't accept it, and I also send it back to you so that you can reprocess it. Now, you can use this in a whole different way. If you're a fanatic and you don't like what I'm saying, I understand. You can probably find exactly where I'm at any given point in time. But I'm also going to tell you that the way that these things work, it doesn't matter. Protected. We can talk about chosen ones all the time, and we can also talk about all the shortcomings of every other category that we can associate with or not associate with. If you're successful, you're associating with success. That's all there is to it. Sometimes when we immerse ourselves in energies that have negative draw, if there's nothing for them to draw from, it doesn't usually create that much of an impact. Now imagine that you're having conversational difficulties with the most direct relationships that you can imagine. In other words, your best partner, your best relative, your best friend. Imagine there was a conversational difficulty. What measures would you go to restore that communication? Would you enjoy sharing these thoughts humbly? And even as publicly as this type of channel might seem, would you share something that personal here? I mean, these internet things, these conversations that happen about addiction and how to learn can put a lot of pressure on someone if they're living a lie. And so for someone to go to a 12-step program, there has to first have been an understanding, just like in the program, that there might be a higher power. Even if you imagine that higher power is within your own self, to concentrate just enough to not get offended and go, this whole conversation is, in fact, powerful. It's so powerful that it obliterated the narcissistic tendencies, the judgments, and it all started with health being something that we really did measure as wealth. And so instead of saying meditation and prayer is great and all that, but what about the real world actions? Well, real world actions include actively saying and giving thanks for all that we have experienced, all that we are experiencing, being in the current. We can experience something, and in the past it could have given us a certain level of happiness, in the current terms, especially under lockdown conditions, it may not give us the same happiness, or it might give us more happiness. All of these things that we're experiencing, all these gray hairs that are occurring, all these conversations that have challenged their way to this one final message, all of this comes down to customs. Recently, I had an item that was held up in customs, and I didn't know when it was going to arrive because the shipping entity was something that I wasn't familiar with here, because this was something that originated outside of my great country, from another great country. And in that country, I know that there are some climate challenges there as well. It seems like as I talk about these things, and let me go ahead and tell you right now, I meant to mention this at the beginning of the video, the sound that you hear is a rock tumbler going. Sometimes I like to use the analogy of a rock tumbler. It's like some of us are a little bit more polished, some of us are a little bit more rough, and all of us are just colliding together in time and space. And we're either polishing each other or roughening each other up, but no matter what, we're still going to end up becoming polished stones. And so the only question is if our heart is also stone, if it's been hardened, or if our heart is open. And the only way you can judge whether a heart's been open or not is to just judge your own heart. And the only way you can judge your own heart is to look at yourself in the mirror. And what I mean is, as we see one another and find ways that we want to just dismiss the other person, we might be finding something in ourselves that we'd like to dismiss. As we find that we want to obfuscate what's being said by someone else because of some judgment or another, especially when we're able to share it with the person next to us. It's like if we had an auditorium full of a hometown team, a hometown team's fans, and we had the hometown, and we had another team come in and start cheering, and the hometown starts cheering for the other team instead of the hometown, well, something's amiss. Usually that's something that's, we're able to quote unquote observe. And at the same time, who knows what was going on? I don't know what's going on this actually happened for our local team. Our local team was out-cheered. Our local team was, whose fans were present, out-cheered the cheering that was going on for the home team. You see what I'm saying? There's an association, even with me telling the story. So it gets kind of weird because I'm telling it knowing that you're hearing the story and you're going, man, this guy's just talking about all kinds of, what I'm talking about is this side or that side. When it becomes unusual, when things start shifting back and forth to where we don't use the common courtesy of going, are we having fun anymore, or are we just critiquing, are we judging? When we get to these points where we would team up with someone who we think is basically more victorious, but never team up with ourselves, then do we have our own personality, or is it 100% based on what we're grabbing every day? For this particular segment you're grabbing, it's going to be over 40 minutes. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I do know that I'm making it on the very morning that I'm going to post it. It's going to talk about why I'm leaving this platform, at least for the foreseeable future. And it's also going to talk about how I'm talking about a channel, I'm talking about a circumstance that I'm 1,000,000,000% knowledgeable about. For almost 45 years now, I grew up in addiction. And I learned it. And I learned how to become addicted, and I learned how to become unaddicted. And I'm not talking about this side or that side. I'm talking about finding inner peace. When you find inner peace, there's nothing you need to pacify your day. At that point, you're just grateful for all of the things that you're accepting into your life. If I only wanted to accept 100% plant-based products, then maybe that's what I should be accepting and not compromising. When we compromise our values because of partnerships that are formed throughout time with community members, and however our roles are being defined, then what we come down to is a possible routine. And this routine program can have a runtime error as well when we start seeing that in wildlife and nature, there's a tremendous decline of wildlife and nature, but there's a tremendous uptick of plastic cups and lids and straws and wrappers, and all this stuff is strewn about in numbers that are way greater and way more frequent to count than the actual wildlife that's in some of these environments. So what I'm talking about in this channel with every song, with every breath, is wellness and conservation. And when I talk about it, we either subscribe to the beliefs that we're able to overcome alcoholism, pills, drugs, pornography, everything. We can overcome everything that we want to overcome that basically is something that gives us some kind of satisfaction throughout the day. We can overcome the addiction to it by basically making choices that are more responsible. And when we make choices that are more responsible, what I mean is, well, what if every addiction had its correlating circumstance? Like, let's say, for an example, people love the feeling of being intoxicated, and that's why they drink. What if one alcohol was made of way less processed ingredients than another alcohol? What if one alcohol was taken ceremoniously only when we got together with our elders to share wisdom like this, communication like this? What if we got together and shared that some people have ill effects when it comes to alcohol, and some people have not got ill effects when it comes to cannabis? And what if it comes down to the point where we go, hey, whether it's alcohol, cannabis, mushrooms, heroin, opiates, alcohol, pornography, theft, whether it's talking false misrepresentation, it doesn't matter. In some cases, there are lists, and some entities have a shared commonality of what it probably is not logical to do towards another person. If we're fully responsible for our being when we look in the mirror, if we're fully responsible for our being, and we believe we're not going to set the house on fire today, if we're fully responsible for our being, and we believe that we're not going to yell at that person in the next car because basically we're in gridlock, if we fully believe that this person was not showing a snake to anger me specifically, if we fully believe that this person talking about wildlife here right now to you is saying that self-control is imperative, if we fully believe those things, it's not a challenge. We just do it. And when we do it, we can wake up feeling good about it. We can wake up, it doesn't matter if we combed our hair or wiped the sleep out of our eyes. It doesn't matter. We're just having a conversation. And this is the most sterile way that we can enjoy these conversations. There's no COVID risk to this conversation that we're having here. You can hear the songs that I'm singing without worry about, anything being sprayed upon the crowd, sweated onto you in the audience who are cheering for me and asking me to take the stage dive so you can catch me and carry me around. There's no end to the joy. There's no end to the positivity that we have until we stop being able to learn with one another. The end is when we basically have determined, hey, I don't like you so much then I'm not going to be able to have a true conversation with you, because the only thing you're doing is jeopardizing my convenience to be able to take my time enjoying those things that I pacify my life away with. In no circumstance would some pre-recorded, scripted, or otherwise made for advertising content be brought to you for your own benefit. It's being brought to you so you can help, I guess, create jobs. What kind of jobs do we want to create, though? Do we want to create jobs where we are all capable of contributing insight that says, hey, instead of a plastic lid and or straw, let's switch even that to something else, And for what it's worth, addiction comes with constant consumption, which leads to the crisis that we're all facing without talking about right now. That's kind of why I put together a catalog of songs. I'm not the best singer in the world. However, this platform allows me to talk with the world. So this global communication channel, I'm basically reaching out, again, asking for someone to help sing the song or to help get me going in that direction to where I can sing the song myself. It's hard to sing a song sometimes when you've felt not just alone. Being alone is great. I absolutely enjoy being alone. I can be alone all the time, making the best choices that have to do with rewarding my own needs. And with all of that comes responsibility. And I'm pretty responsible. I'm able to travel the nation without, belittling other people, without stepping on people's toes, and without trying to misinterpret what's being said so that communication is blindsided. Instead, I try to open up communication by talking as openly and honestly as I can about the circumstances that we are faced with. And with those conversations in mind, sometimes I'm met with people who do want to have these more open discussions, because we realize that something is, in fact, in need of being addressed. The only thing is that sometimes when we're recognizing those things, it's because we're recognizing that we want something else to overlook. And it might be because we're trying to overlook addiction. So when we look in the mirror and say, hey, well, you're saying that you're the same, and you're telling us how, but what are, well, it depends. Again, from the perspective aspect of it, I don't know many people who have gone without food for a multitude of days. I don't know many people who have gone without meat for a multitude of days. And I don't know many people who really want to go without plastic so much that they're, I guess, having conversations that are making people angry. I've never thought that I would live in an era where I'd make people angry by saying, hey, less meat is good. I've got my friends. They help me out. They hear all the words that I say. They share all my posts, especially nature. But then I went green, stopped using plastic, and said that less meat is good. I've still got my Jeep. It gets me where I'm going. I'd take it in a hybrid if I could. These are concepts that, as we become more receptive to the fact that all of these things that we're doing are celebrations, as we become more receptive to the fact that even if I'm totally against those thumpers. I'm totally against the thumpers. Even if I'm totally against snakes. I'm totally against snakes. Even if I'm totally against guys with long hair. I'm totally against people with beards. I'm totally against people who play guitar. Even if I'm totally against everything. The fact is that I'll be presented with a lot less of what I really do appreciate and love. And sometimes the way that we're deprived of those things that we appreciate and love is suddenly and without warning. And so that's why I wanted to post this today. And I think I'm going to disconnect for a little while. And some people are going to see this, and basically a lot of people more might see this because it's a generalized conversation. And the generalized conversation about addiction is whether we ourselves can make a choice or not. You know, we can have all the feeding tubes put into us that humanity thinks is necessary in whatever nation we're in. And the fact of the matter is that we might stand to reason that we should be able to make our own choice in terms of the frequency with which we entertain ourselves and how we entertain ourselves from the moment that we wake up. Are we helping others? Are we putting others down? Are we even present? Are we having a conversation with one another? Or do we present such hostility that it's so hard to even hear when someone is going through any kind of adversity, because we perceive adversity itself in this convenience-based world as hostility, as a threat. If that's true, then no wonder we're divided, because we're self-destructing. If we're self-destructing, that's just the way it goes. If during the process of self-destruction there are any others in humanity who understand that the conversations that we need to have are about and with our fathers. Without our fathers and grandfathers, grandmothers and great-grandmothers and grandchildren, without our chosen and unchosen, what else are we doing anything for? For just ourselves? If we're doing things for ourselves, health is wealth. When we are grateful for what we are partaking of, we make better choices. We make better choices because that energy resonates. It resonates throughout time. It resonates even as the core, the very core, is the only thing that remains. As all the rough edges and soft edges get chipped away in this rock tumbler of life that we're experiencing. All of this we know is true insight. And yet we also know that in some scripts it's been said, what's good will be considered bad, what's bad will be considered good. But also there'll be a shift. We're either having a conversation again at some point, or we've shifted. And for me, the choice is quite clear. I let the current take on the rest of whatever is happening. Let go, How many ways have you heard it? The current. We can either go against it or understand that it has a purpose. And every bit of the tumbling we're doing on the riverbed is to find our own peace. And sometimes we can blame others continuously for being the sore point. Or we can look to ourselves and go, I wonder if I was unjust. If I can recognize the unjust, if I can recognize the disregard, the disrespect, I wonder if that's what we were presenting when we were having the conversation. All you have to do is look at the words that are being said, hear the words that are being said. I'm glad to see you here. Almost an hour into a conversation. I'm just sitting on an ice chest here. It's not the most comfortable way to be enjoying 7 a.m. Many of us are still asleep. Comfortable beds, it's cold outside. To even have a bed, how amazing. And for most of us who are watching this, to have the electronics, to have this conversation right now, how powerful. And to also have the invisibility, the cloaking, where basically from everything to a rock band's fan club to our own peers, we can have such a division that we simply can't really communicate anymore. Everything is based on rituals and traditions. There's no empathy. When we get to that point where there's no empathy, who's going to help us when it comes to addiction if it's not our very selves? Do we unsubscribe just because we can't hear the other person's perspective? Why are we so angry at that perspective? Is it anger? Is it accurate? What I'm talking with? I say talking to because, well, look back. It's been a very quiet participation among my peers. On these social channels, we know that there's an obscure algorithm, a moving target that'll help enable conversations or to stall conversations. There's probably even artificial intelligence, which is based on whether we keep scrolling or not, and or what gets shown to one another on those scroll feeds or not. And in all of that, that's part of the current. So if you're seeing this, you got to wonder, why are we seeing this? Have you ever filled out a personal ad and another person filled out a personal ad and you both found each other's ad? You both found each other to be your compatibility, your matched up in thought partner? Have you ever done anything like that? Do you remember the games we would play in some instances of previous eras? I see it on the movies a lot represented, spin the bottle, stuff like that. Do we ever look at how fate aligns things? How did we get to our comfortable lives that we're in right now in order to bring each other the rich content that we're bringing? And is it really rich? Or are we bringing each other down? Spiritually, the only thing that you can really understand is that from limitless energy, even the burnouts turn into something positive. Even the black hole turns into something positive. The burnt out stars, even in the darkness, well, now there's a bright light shining somewhere. For every dark night, there's a bright day after that. Anyway, if you heard all of this, thank you so much for spending another hour making committed choices to perceiving your own emotions in your own hands, perceiving your own hands and the things that pass through them. If you're not minding what's going into your own self, what you're choosing to consume, by some point or another, it might just be a feeding tube of whatever concoction it is that we keep our people alive with, but not necessarily quick. The quick and the dead.
When we're alive, are we alive, or are we like alive? So try to keep this low key. I hope that the rock tumbler doesn't really impact the way that you are hearing this. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and thank you for sharing your time with me. Peace, love, and all that old school stuff.